Great morning, world. Great morning, humans. Just checking to see if we are. Yes, it looks like we're good. Awesome. Great morning, everybody. Welcome to Make Sense Mondays. I'm your boy, Dr. JC Doornick, aka The Dragon. And it's my hope and intention that as you boot up your operating system today and have hopes and dreams to have a better day, that we'll do a little bit of sense making here today and talk about some cool observations and things that are probably going to come your way, maybe arm and equip you with some cool tools and strategies and different perspectives that'll make this a better day. And what I'm going to do right now is light my incense. Have you ever found yourself behind schedule? Isn't that interesting? That whole concept. Great morning, Kathy. Great morning. I believe Vicky probably, because I can't tell who that is. Yeah, the whole idea of being behind schedule. Isn't that funny? You know, because it's not a great feeling. It's a reactive thing. I think everybody here experiences that. I'd love to hear your feedback on the concept of being behind schedule. But it makes you, if you're conscious and you want to take a look at things, take a look under the hood of things, you'll start to look at it and be like, well, maybe I should evaluate that schedule. Like maybe the schedule is behind me, or maybe the schedule is not right for me. Anyway, just thinking about a lot of cool stuff. So great morning. Today's focus is and topic for this Rise Up. Great morning, Stacy. Good to see you. Today's focus is the blind spot. Double-edged sword, right? There's so many different things. When I say, hey, do you have a blind spot? That loads into your head and you have a different perception of it. But for the sake of this morning, the topic that we're going to discuss is the blind spot regarding the things that we can't see that often hold us back, right? It's that idea of, hey, great morning, Lindsay. Great morning, Chris. The idea of, our unconscious programmed mind and operating system getting in our way. You very interpret that when you're in this oscillating structure and you're trying to move towards something, saying, I just got to get out of my own way. That's what we're talking about today. Because if you can get out of your own way today, which is not easy, and we'll talk about that, everything is going to get better. So we're streaming live. What we do on Mondays is we stream live. I take probably the thing that always in my life scared me the most, and that is putting myself out there, right? And public speaking and opening myself up to criticism and ridicule and occasionally compliments. But I do that live on Mondays. So anything could happen here. You know, there could be a cat issue. There could be some sounds of, the pipes indicating somebody's going to the bathroom or something like that here in the dragon's lair. So I hope you enjoy that potential of the live podcast. But that's what we do, is we do a live show on Mondays. But every day during the week, we meet in what's called our Make Sense Academy. So that's our private community. That's the sponsor of the Make Sense podcast. It's my wife, Mika, aka Chickens, her passion project. And, just an amazing environment and community where people are really, really starting to lean into becoming the follow-through version of them. Executing on this idea of changing the way we look at things so that the things that we look at change. I think a lot of people will probably just have that on their tombstone, that they tried to do that. In the Make Sense Academy, we're actually doing that. And it's very, very exciting to see people coming alive and transforming into different versions of people, physically, healthy, mentally, and as well as financially. Great news on that front. And this is an additional thing. We're starting this month. If you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, or anybody that's in any way, shape, or form looking to network and meet the right people, get in the room where things happen. Maybe you're have done or are interested in things like BNI and networking and all that stuff, my partner, Jules Loken, and I are creating something very, very, very cool. And it's a cost-free cool. And it's called The Big Idea. The Big Idea is a networking meeting that meets, twice a month. And this is the first month that it's meeting. And it's an environment where you're going to come in and kill two birds with one stone. And what I mean by that is it's the person that can enter a room and leave that room having everybody be interested in them that is probably closing the most business and things like that, right? The master communicator, the master networker. So we have this great idea of creating this networking group, and we call it The Big Idea, Networking on Fire. And it's going to meet 2 times a month. If you want to be involved in that, it's free, it's cost free. Just in the comments, just say The Big Idea. We have a website for it and you can sign up for it. But what's cool about this concept is you're going to get all of the elements of what you're looking for. You're going to meet the right people. You're going to meet potential clients. You're going to make collaborations, but also we're going to add an element in the first segment of each meeting where we're going to teach you how to become a master communicator and a master networker. And this is all sponsored by the Make Sense Academy, but this is a cost-free environment and you're all welcome to engage in that. So once again, if you're watching this live, we're live streaming until Facebook stops letting us do that on all Facebook channels. We're on Instagram. And then we always post the Make Sense Mondays to the Rise Up with Dragon YouTube channel. So if you're interested in Make Sense Academy, then checking that out, risk-free, just write community. And then we'll send you the link to that. And then if you're interested in this networking meeting, I mean, why wouldn't you be interested in a networking meeting? Like getting in a room with like 40, 50, 60 or more people, business owners that are looking to network. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And also learning progressively how to become a master networker, a master communicator. Just one of those no-brainer things. So that's something that we're going to be starting in April. Just DM me The Big Idea. And naturally, very excited that the new episode 8 now of the new Make Sense podcast, Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast, going over the pause, which is the second step of the interface response system. It's a very sequential health or transformative process of listening to the Make Sense podcast. People are learning how to create different perspectives, shift their perspectives, get out of their own way, create a healthier response system. So we're actually at the phase right now where we're teaching the 4-step, what I call interface response system, where you can basically reprogram your mind and the way that you look at things, the way you make sense of things, but more importantly, the only thing that you control, and that is your response. So take a look at that. DM me community or in the comments wherever you're listening from. For Make Sense Academy, and then write The Big Idea, or just say both or something like that. Anyway, very, very excited. And I'm excited for you today as we start off. It appears and I want to say congratulations to you on this Monday morning. It appears that you've been granted a blessing of another 24 hours a day, or of this day, right? So maybe the first thing that we can do today is just experience gratitude, and in recognition, in humility, and recognition that we don't know how much time we have, but here we are talking to one another, right? This is why you might want to share this with somebody else. Whenever you're watching a live, you can push share and share it to your channels. Maybe tag somebody that needs to recognize, or if you're watching this as a recording on YouTube, then feel free to share, that with people. But think about that. Are you aware that you didn't know if you were going to have this day, but here you are, you got it. You've been blessed with another 24. So congratulations to you. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss some ideas right now. And that's the whole purpose of Make Sense Mondays and my book and my podcast and everything, that might, keyword might, because you'd have to do something about it, assist you in living a full, like making it your best life, right? Living this day that you've just been blessed to its fullest and making it count, which is what I think in the last 10 minutes of life, we're really going to give a crap about, right? All of the other stuff we're going after right now will be completely irrelevant. You're building a footprint, and you're building a legacy and a footprint in your life right now. And that's what you're going to evaluate in the last 10 minutes. So let's talk about some cool things right now that very well might help you execute on that. So just a quick highlight of the episode that just dropped. In the sequence of the interface response system, and this kind of plays well into today's topic of the blind spot. But the idea is that in step one, we just took note that our brains have been pre-programmed, and that actually fits perfectly into the blind spot, because the blind spot is created by the fact that our brains are already planning on doing things. We've spoken before about the fact that when somebody is sleepwalking, all of the voluntary conscious components of their brain are offline, and all of the unconscious components of our brain are online, which proves that your brain doesn't even require you to operate. So that being said, and recognizing that 95% of our thoughts, feelings, and actions are on autopilot and run by the shot caller, our subconscious mind, right? That means that there's a very, very good chance that you're going to screw up today, right? But your brain won't think you're screwing up. Your brain's just going to run its regular operating system. It's got hardware, it's got software, and it's got this system of interfacing with the world. But step one is called brain awareness perception, and that is just about acknowledging that that might not pertain to your current reality. You may have upgraded to a new place where your old operating system needs to be updated. So the first step that we learned last week in the episode 7, brain awareness perception, was just to take note of that. So step 2, which is the one that dropped today, and that's the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast, and that is the pause. The very idea of recognizing this potentially inefficient, often faulty system, the idea of putting your foot in your mouth, or two people looking at something and seeing them differently, right? Maybe your operating system is a little bit off, which validates the idea of pausing. That's what this is about. Is I'm going to teach techniques and strategies to actually slow things down and put your knee-jerk reflex on safety. Now, what's interesting about the word pause or safety is that it's not indefinite, right? It's not saying stop. We're not going to stop your knee-jerk reflex, because maybe there's elements of it that are good, like removing your hand from fire or getting out of the way of a speeding car. So it's not about that. But when it comes to interfacing with people and events and things, or even the thoughts in your head that very often are not true, your thoughts and your feelings, maybe it's just your heart feeling and your brain thinking, which is they're going to do that sleepwalking, right? With or without you. So if you can separate yourself from that, from the stimulus that you're perceiving, right, that you're interfacing with, and your normal knee-jerk reflex by pausing it, putting it on safety, you'll step into what we call the space between those two, or the eye of the storm, right? Viktor Frankl, and I reference him in the book and in the podcast, talks about the space between the stimulus and the response is where the game is won. And that's how he was able to, you want to talk about something drastic. How about the idea of being, completely just obliterated by the Holocaust, surviving, but being just completely obliterated by the Holocaust, and finding your way to actually forgive those that did the monstrous things that they did, forgive them. He says that the only place he was able to do that was in the space between, right? So anyway, that's what this is about. You're going to love this episode. But if you haven't been listening to my podcast, I recommend that you start from the beginning. It's sequential. I think that the longest distance from A to B in this world right now, we're seeing it more than ever, is a shortcut. Right? The longest distance to get from where you are to where you want to be is a shortcut. So my podcast is sequential. I recommend that you listen to it from the beginning and catch up. They're about 30-minute episodes, and there's 8 of them right now. By the end of the year, there'll be 52, right? So anyway, that being said, let's talk about this blind spot. The reason why it's relevant is the blind spot, like the idea of like things that we can't see. The first time that I say that, I would assume that you're probably initially thinking about this idea in relation to your anatomy, where you recognize that there's actual areas in our field of vision, like when people do the finger thing, right? Where you no longer can see things. Like as you're looking at this podcast right now and this video, you're looking at me and there's things to your back left and back right outside of the field of this video that you can't see. And the question is are they there when you can't see them? But my point is they're a blind spot. So if something comes at you from those areas, you're not going to know. And you also probably think about the idea of being in a car. We all know about that blind spot. I always joke with my daughter. I don't know if anybody has a scenario like this, but there's this one area when we come out of our neighborhood, when I'm taking her to school, where I have to be very, very careful because there's a blind spot of cars coming around. And the joke is that my daughter seems to like rock her head. Does anybody have a situation like that? Rock her head back and forth as if she's like trying to put her head in front of me. So we always joke about that. I always say, God, your head is like an orange on a toothpick right now. We laugh about that. But anyway, that's the natural way of looking at the blind spot, like behind our heads, like I was just saying. So what I'm talking about is something a little bit different, right? Our brains have 6 senses, and our programmed subconscious mind is constantly being processed by those 6 senses. We have this sense-making machine that is our brain and our tentacles, right? Our 6 senses, our smell, our eyes. Like we never look at them that way, but those things are basically perceiving and retrieving and interfacing with reality, communicating with our brain and such. That's how we sense make, right? So I'm talking about a different blind spot, right? I'm talking about a blind spot that you refuse to look at, right? If we acknowledge that our brains are programmed for the most part, right? Within that program is our system of making our perception of things, right? That's why 2 people can look at the same scenario and have a different experience, a different perception of it. And that perception then comes in and processes in our brain. And there's a lot going on in our brain, right? We don't just look at it and look at the facts and the science of something. There's other things that are happening before you even know what you know, right? That's another thing I talk about in the podcast is very often we think we're making conscious decisions without acknowledging that our subconscious mind has already done like 100 steps and offered a suggestion to our conscious mind that's persuading it to do things, right? So sometimes we don't recognize that our conscious mind, that little bit of time that we're conscious, is actually persuaded and influenced by our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind has been programmed by who? Our mother, our father, our teacher, our preacher, right? Especially in the formative years. And then we placed ourselves in specific, tailor-made, supportive of what we've been taught environments, like through social media and society, right? We very often protect ourselves from anything other than what validates what we believe to be true. And then the E in the MFTPSE is evolution, right? It's been passed on to us. Now you can look at things that have been passed on to us by cavemen, but more specifically, your genetics and your tree, right? Just remember that a lot of the opinions that you have and the concepts that you have are not your own. They've been programmed by other people, and those people got them from other people. So if you go up the lineage, and hereditary wise, you've adopted through evolution, things from cavemen, but also the tailor-made specific things that your family, right, on and on and on has passed down to you. So here you are going around the world, right, thinking that you're getting the big picture and you're taking a look at things, right? But you're not seeing the big picture. You're perceiving it. You're taking your best guess with your operating system, what you see. So can you see that your operating system in large part has a lot to do with what you see? As a matter of fact, two operating systems see something completely different and feel something different and think something different about it. So when I talk about the blind spot, what I'm talking about is this phenomenon where, let me just read this. So in this case, the blind spot represents anything. This is a power move for you today, and I'll show you at the end how we can do something about it. But the blind spot represents anything that challenges a concept or core value, right, that you've become tethered to within your program. Now think about that. That could be something that you will stand strong to right now, like religion or political preferences, or many of these hot topics out there about, who knows, pronouns or same-sex marriages or whatever. There are certain things that you feel very, very strong about, right? Now, I'm not telling you to drop those things, but I just want you to know that those things were taught to you by your life experience. You didn't come up with those ideas on your own, right? Because if you came up with ideas on your own, they would have come from a place of open and curious where you look at all sides, right? Most of the time when you hear somebody put an exclamation point behind a statement, this is what I believe, this is my core belief, this is the way my family operates, just notice that there's an exclamation point at the end, meaning it's this and nothing else. That's proof right there that people don't look at both sides. So that's the program in action. Now, if you want to do something about that, just simply take your statements and replace the exclamation points with question marks. Here's what it would sound like. I got to be careful not to pick a hot topic. Let's just look at something that's right or wrong, right? And you know how to decide that. Say, that is right, or that is wrong. And here's what it would sound like with a question mark. That is right. That is wrong. And in that place, guess what you're doing? You're looking at both sides. So that's what it would look like to not have a programmed response. It's the disputation of it. But if you find yourself not open and curious and agile to dispute things, well, I forgive you for you know not what you do. That is your program running. And all I'm pointing out, if you're open and curious and looking to grow, is that you didn't come up with that idea on your own. So that would validate, hence the episode 8, that would validate the reason to just take a look under the hood, right? Now, you have a choice to either take a look under the hood or just continue with your current operating system, which is comfortable. We'll give you a high five for that. But if you're seeking growth, we know where growth takes place. It takes place out of your comfort zone. Your current operating system and program is your comfort zone. So outside of the comfort zone is just checking all the things. You know what's interesting? I talk a lot about this, is the idea of operating in your perception and your sense making as a scientist. You know what's interesting about scientists? Yes, they look for science, but scientists are not tethered to any theories. They're actually always open and excited and curious to learn new ones. Go through your life as a scientist. Now that's challenging, right? Because we've built our programming as a means of survival and natural selection, right? So we're scared to get rid of our programming, right? Because it's like, it means that all bets are off and we might be wrong about everything. As I always say in our community, and they always laugh, is, personal growth, guys, is exhausting. It's exhausting, it's inconvenient, and it's hard. It's way more than just eating right and going to the gym. It's also about getting out of your friggin' way, right? So you see, the blind spot that we're talking about is not really like a limitation. The challenge here is that, this operating system that we have has this ability to actually like protect ourselves from certain things. Like there's certain things that are happening in the life, and I'll explain one of them for me. Like I don't like to watch the news, right? Because that side of the world I've determined is just in no way, shape, or form in support of my desire to have a good day. Some people would get pissed off at me, but anytime I hear somebody talking about the news, I have this knack of just ignoring them and moving on, right? Because I wasn't seeking. That wasn't one of the things that I was seeking that day. So I have this ability, and so do you, to take your core beliefs and your operating system and your goals and your perception and sense-making system, but create blind spots that shut things out. Now, there's a couple of cool terms here. One of them is this idea of cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance is something that's built into your operating system. It happens without you knowing it. It means there's this phenomenon where human beings say that they're going to do something, right? But then in no way, shape, or form are their actions, thoughts, and feelings in connection with that. They might start like that when they're motivated, but cognitive dissonance is when there's a dissonance, right? There's a separation between what we say we want to do and what we actually see ourselves doing. But right there's another example of how powerful the program is. The one that creates these blind spots is you say you want to do something, but you're used to doing this all the time, right? So there's a pattern interrupt there where all of a sudden you just recognize, hey, I said I was going to do this today, but I didn't. Well, once again, you're forgiven for you know not what you do. You forget how powerful the program is. So the key step there, and that's step one of the interface response system, is to just have the ability and the power. It's a power move to recognize why that stuff happens. It happens because you've completely lost your ability to recognize that you're programmed to go this way. And even though you decide all of a sudden to go this way, your program thinks that you're crazy. You're actually the enemy, right? You're the one making the bad decision because everything says from past experience and what we're usually doing, our usual operating system, that you're wrong, not it. So that's what cognitive dissonance is. But then there's this term that I talk about a lot called cognitive bias. Now, cognitive bias is like this contingency plan, right? So when we start to notice that there's a difference in what we're saying and what other people are saying, our brains pick up on that. And that's why we create a blind spot, right? So let's say you have a political preference, right? And you're very, very strong in this, especially as we're coming towards elections and stuff like that. And somebody else says something different. You will not even take the time to acknowledge whether or not what they're saying has any validity or fact if it's different than what you say. So cognitive bias is this contingency plan where we will go and do everything, hang out with the people, create communities and do everything to support and validate what we think, but also look for reasons to discredit anything that anybody else thinks, right? So we're biased. We create a bias. And the thing that's unhealthy about cognitive bias is we'll do that even in the absence of somebody else telling us something that's valid, right? Like that would be like you looking up during the middle of the day at that bright, shining, hot thing in the sky that most people call the sun and telling me that it's the moon, right? And I go, are you sure about that? Well, I'd probably say, is that right? You sure about that? And then you say, yep, it's the moon. Now, in that moment right there, you've just identified that I'm a threat because I'm pretty sure that's the sun. So cognitive bias will set in and you will then immediately try to find somebody else that thinks it's the moon. And then you'll search on Google, which might be funny, to prove that the moon is visible during the day and all of that stuff. So that's what cognitive bias is. So this idea of a blind spot is something that you don't currently know until you open up and look for it. So there are blind spots that I'm talking about, and these are the things that can often hurt us, right? Because we're unaware of how powerful they are. And a blind spot is created by a human being that has decided to not be open and curious and not be agile, not be the scientist that's open to what is best. You understand? Or what might be better. So cognitive bias is an interesting thing because it's part of your unconscious operating system, and it's where you form opinions and things like this. And it's also where you write people off that are saying things different than you. So what I try to practice is when somebody comes to me and wants to share terrible news that's happening in the world, I used to just put them in my blind spot and just move on, and probably in a rude way sometimes. So now I just realized that I can separate myself from it, right? So when somebody tells me something, I just go, and I separate. That's what I teach you in 8. episode 8, I separate myself from it. I don't have to be tethered to it, but also I let myself be open and curious because I know that they're in my blind spot. So that's an interesting thing. So you see, the blind spot is not a limitation that's been created by your hardware, right? It's not something that's been created by your hardware, right? It's been created by your software. Your software is your program. Everybody has the same hardware for the most part. So this is a software problem. So the program that you're running in your brain, that's your software. So that's why I never get upset when I come across somebody that is talking complete nonsense. I don't get upset about it. I have to voluntarily do this, that they're talking nonsense, or someone that places exclamation points behind their sentences as statements of what is, right? This is, no matter what. I'm not even willing to look at everything else. It actually is the very reason why people have learned to say, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So God seems to have this thing under wrap. God has a very healthy interface response system. So be careful with that one, though. Here's an interesting thing. Saying, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Be careful with that, because somebody that is committed to being right, in no way, shape, or form has any interest in being forgiven for not knowing something, right? So be careful with that, right? Like, don't tell them that. You can think that, but don't say, I forgive you, for you know not what you do, because then that's you blaming them for not knowing what to do. So what's the cure? Here's the cure. And here are 2 very, very simple steps, yet profound power moves per se. So the first step, should you want to grow today, right? And that's going to have to be a vulnerable thing. This idea of taking advantage of this day that you have. First, we must create a desire to grow beyond our comfort zone. So you have to actually have a desire to grow beyond your comfort zone. This can't be anyone else's idea. It can't be my idea. You can't be prompted by this episode. It has to be your idea. It has to be the idea of the individual. They must have a desire to evolve as well as a reason to do so. That's the idea of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. You have to want to grow, and a very strong reason to, that will override your program. So the second step is this. We must allow ourselves to become aware of this process. This is brain awareness perception. We have to become open and curious and aware of this process that's taking place in the halls of insanity of our brain, in the halls of insanity of our brain. The power move today for you, should you decide, should you accept the challenge, is to become open and curious about everything. Open and curious about everything. Everything, including your core beliefs, is disputable. That's a tough move. That's a tough move. I think I just lost everybody right there, including the things that you claim to know about the way things should be or ought to be. Remember, for the most part, here's the reminder of the program, those ideas were taught to you by others, and the environment that you have been tethered to, which you created. We create this supportive environment to support our ideas. We hang out with certain people. We commune with certain people. There's certain days that we commune with people, and we do that unknowingly to protect what we believe. We've been doing that most of our life. The idea is maybe there's a better way. Maybe. Are you somebody that can say maybe? I'm going to have some t-shirts made about that. So from this new reality, it will be feasible, right, to remain open and curious to everything out there that was previously hidden in your blind spot. Make sense? So love and appreciate you. That's Make Sense Monday for today. I absolutely love doing this. You can check these out in previous episodes in my YouTube channel. I'll always put that in the environment so you can see that. And then remember to follow, rate, all that stuff, the Make Sense podcast. And if you're interested in the Make Sense Academy, write community. And if you're interested in joining our free, cost-free networking group, The Big Idea, just say The Big Idea. Love and appreciate you all. Make it a great day.